Some of you may be familiar with the fact that the default SNES Classic emulator, Canoe, basically supports about 75% of games. There are headers, footers, preset IDs, and the distinction between high and low ROMs to worry about with any given game. And I'm going to show you my personal method of doing a dual setup for SNES 9X and Canoe, so you could run games through both of them. And Cluster made it possible to type in the RetroArch command line, but I'm going to show you my personal way of doing it because I just want to have both sets on there just to keep things quick and easy for me when I flash over. And I'm going to show you my working folder and what I do to get a game for Canoe and what I do to get a game for RetroArch. So I made a folder for SNES games that I'm working with, and I made a folder for Canoe and a folder for RetroArch. We're going to take Three Ninjas Kickback as my first test game, and I'm going to copy that into each of the folders. And as I always say, if I make a little flub in a video, I just leave it in. I do not edit my videos ever. If I make a mistake, it's there for your entertainment. Now, as far as Canoe is concerned, if you have the most recent hack sheet, and it's officially released now, guys and gals, you'll have the ability to go into settings, have this option enabled where it says compress games when adding. Then you just add the SFC, the SMC, or even a zip or a 7-zip. It'll do everything for you. So I'm going to go to File, Add. And I'm going to go into my working folder and add the Canoe version of Three Ninjas Kickback and just let that do its default parameters for command line, compression, and all that good stuff. See, it pointed to the Canoe emulator. I'm going to put in my prefix system that I've done for pretty much everything. SNESC, semicolon, space. And then this is going to run with Canoe. Then I'm going to add the artwork. Now that's all said and done. I'm going to go into my Canoe, the RetroArch folder. And you got to do just a little bit of extra work. And this is a little trick I devised as far as compression techniques when I first got the NES Classic. And it's worked like quite fantastically for many things I've done since then. So anyways, the idea here is you want to take a source game, and I'm just going to extract this right now. And each time I'm extracting it, I'm deleting the extra file so I'm not going overboard here. So I have the root file right here, which is the SFE file. And I'm going to just throw that into a 7-zip. Now the idea here is by doing a secondary layer on top of it, when you add it to Hacksheet, it's going to reject that second layer and give you what's underneath it. So it's like basically a present that's wrapped, and you're taking the wrapping off when you add it in the Hacksheet. Or bulletproof vest in a way, or Trojan horse. But anyways, right now we have the 7-zip, and I'm going to throw that into the zip. So when I go inside here, I have the 7-zip inside it. So now I'm going to add it to Hacksheet, and Hacksheet is unable to read the format underneath, so it's going to reject it and not convert it into the Canoe format, nor do the command line for the Canoe. So I'm going to go to add this. This would be my RetroArch version, Three Ninjas Kickback. And it just did a standard command line. So I'm going to just set this up so you guys see how I do this for RetroArch. I'm going to do the same thing, SNESC, semicolon. This one I'm going to designate 9X. Make things nice and easy. And right here where it says bin 7-zip, right here where the 7-zip is, that's generally the extension of any file you add. And the cords that you add take the extensions into account. In the case of Super Nintendo, I'm going to go into my modules, install extra modules. I'm going to go down to my SNES core that I want to run this with. We're going to run it with SNES 9X 2005. Available executables and arguments. Right here I have /bin SNES. So I wanted to say that so I can run it through the RetroArch core. So I'm going to change that 7-zip to SNES. Another thing I'd like to briefly show you here. Say you want to run 2005 core, 2010 core, and 2002 core. You want to, basically tri-wield or double-wield it. there's a little trick that I put in the configuration here that you could use. And we're going to go to the SNES chords again. If you go down to the second command line argument, I have it set for SNES 05, and this one's set for SNES 02, and this one's set for SNES 10. So you could add the games, and instead of using the bin/SNES, designate it to each of the separate chords if you have 2 or 3 of them installed. And you'll see this actually helps out with certain games, because you might want to run like the Star Wars game with 2010, because the more accurate emulation makes the music sound better. But other games like Pilot Wings run better with 2005, so you want to designate that to 2005. The less accurate emulation makes some games run noticeably faster. Anyways, if you're running RetroArch, again, briefly, you're going to want to have, and I just updated my chords today to coincide with the release of the official hack sheet. Everything's running great. Mine's an experimental set, as you can see in the README. Anyways, you're going to want RetroArch Standard Version, SNESC, and I did one for the NES Classic and one for the SNES Classic. You want to make sure you install the proper one on the right system. Since I'm running the SNES Mini right now, I'm going to install this one. Then I'm going to have the SNES 9X 2005 core. If you don't know how to install these, you simply go to click OK. It's going to give you this, setup steps here, but basically, in short speak, you're going to hold the power and reset away from you for multiple seconds until you get the little flash across the screen thing. And then when it's done, you can pretty much flash your games and you're good to go. But I have my games added. I'm going to go into settings here. Pages folder structure. Custom show folder manager every time. This way, anytime I click sync, it's going to give me a folder setup of which I could add icons to right here if I want to. And I can rename and all that. And I have an unsorted folder. I typically just leave the unsorted folder there, because games that go right into that, when you click to the main GUI, it goes right to that folder every time. And if you have 100 folders, it's very invaluable as a quick escape route. So I have a nice little icon for that too. Now I have my Super Nintendo games. I'm going to cut and paste these 3 Ninjas Kickback into my Super Nintendo folder. So I have 4 sets of games to test out with RetroArch as well as Canoe, and at least 2 or 3 of these don't work with Canoe as of yet. So we're going to flash these over and see what happens. And every once in a while, when you're using RetroArch and you flash the system, you might turn the system on and find your controllers not working right away. You could literally just unplug the controller, plug it back in, and it'll work. Or you could power the system back off and then back on, and it'll work. I mean, it's a very, very rare occurrence, but if your controller's not working, that's generally why. You just got to power off back on or unplug and plug back in. So we're going to test out these Canoe and RetroArch versions real quick. So I'm going into my Super Nintendo folder. And I forgot to put the artwork for 3 Ninjas Kickback. No biggie there. Anyways, I have Rock and Roll Racing. And I have the Canoe version, which I'm going to run first. And notice it goes to a black screen. It's not compatible with Canoe. So I hear the sound effects of the game in action, but it's not working. Now I'm going to quit back to the main GUI, and we're going to test this out with RetroArch, which I pretty much double compressed. And by adding the double compression, it eliminated the outer layer, and all I had to do is just designate the /bin to SNES for RetroArch core, and it's good to go. And I'm going to push select and start, pull up my RetroArch options, and you can see I'm plain and simple running this through the SNES 9X 2005 core. Let's see if this game is compatible. I'm going to push start. And it's not a dark screen, it's actually functioning this time. This is a fantastic game. I played the hell out of it back in the 1990s. I always love how they had the officially licensed tracks. I can only imagine a Sega CD or a TurboGrafx CD version of this having the real deal. It'd be so fantastic. And they made another game in this earlier in the set called RPM Racing. And just try the game out for yourself. It's a fantastic game. Now we're going to go to Street Fighter Alpha 2, and we're going to test it out with RetroArch. This is another game that I've heard doesn't run. And we have RetroArch 2005 working here. I've heard this one doesn't run on Canoe. I'm not sure if there's an NTSC difference or a PAL difference, or if it's one of the header or footers or preset IDs that need out there. We'll find out though. But as of right now, this one is running quite well on here. Okay, we're good to go on that. And the last one I'm going to test is going to be Star Ocean, which is one that I don't think anybody has gotten run yet. We're going to try that on RetroArch. So far, so good. And it's running with RetroArch. Of course, I'd have to have a profile to actually start the game. And of course, there's a translated version. I'm playing a non-translated version right now. And I'm completely failing to play the game because I can't read Japanese, but you guys get the idea. The game's loading. Now we're going to see what happens when I try loading the Canoe version of it. We have a dark screen and it's not working whatsoever. Anyways, this is how I do the dual setup of running RetroArch as well as the Canoe core. Hopefully this helps you guys out. And there'll be more videos to come with other related things to command lines, etc.